they can hear you.
All right. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome back. We are at the table, just three guys and a couple of Bibles, and we're back with you. So thanks for staying with us today. I know some of you enjoy sticking around with the likes of people like us, so we enjoy your company too. Now, we did think we would do a dialogue today, even though Sherry's not here to keep us on track.
Right.
So she's at home watching and hopefully feeling better already. So welcome. What are you guys thinking about today in terms of zeal and the roots of righteousness or anything like that?
Well, like you said, sometimes when the cat's away, the mice will play. So we're on our own here with that.
We could get in trouble.
We could get in trouble.
We could get in trouble. But as always, Sherry prepared us a nice lunch, and we really appreciate that as always.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, before we get started, I did want to remind people we do still have seats available here at the UI Center South for our Sukkot gathering, our Sukkot weekend. We're doing a weekend for Sukkot. And John has arranged at 2 local hotels for certain rooms that have been reserved in a block of rooms in both of the hotels. So if you would like to join us, you're welcome to do that. Dr. Tabor, the Tylers, Ralph Bunton, Timothy Thompson, a lot of the North Carolina crowd are coming in. There are people literally from all over who've expressed interest. So hopefully many of you can join us. We're trying to set this up now. We haven't fully developed the program yet, but one of the things we wanted to do was sort of have a little more downtime and not have it so many lectures or teachings or talks, and allow people to kind of have some time to fellowship. So that's one of the driving factors in setting that up. Of course, we will have some teaching. We will have formal classes, if you will, but we also want to have some relaxation. So
Some free time, right?
Some free time. And we always say that, and then we always end up filling up the whole ticket. So we're going to have to try really hard, but we want to spend Friday evening. The dates are October 18, 19, and 20, and so we hope that many of you can join us. We'll be posting more on that and publishing it in the weekly bulletin. So, all right, what else we got in terms of announcements? Anything?
Now, just to remind everybody to, if you know you're coming, just to give us an idea of how to prepare. And I know we still have some time, and so do you. Try going on the web page that Ross set up, and just click on there to let us know that you're coming, so that we can get an idea of the numbers.
That's right.
A better idea of the numbers, because we're going to try and do a couple of things, and it depends on how many folks are going to be here.
That's right. So, what else is going on? What's some good stuff? Anybody have any ideas to talk about on this class?
Go ahead.
You first, John.
You know me.
Jump in.
I mean, I've been trained to hold it until we go live.
I usually have to try to hold you back. Yeah. It's like, okay, go ahead.
So I understand it. It's a hard thing to for some of us to get our hands around on the jealousy side of the Almighty, of the Creator. And I get it, because Abraham actually sought out God. I mean, he was looking for him, and God recognized that. And so, he crossed over. He started, being with God. And so his seed became the chosen people. It's like a relationship that developed, and it developed with the seed of Abraham and Israel and all that. So you've got this, and it's like it says in the scriptures, I was as a husband to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that, that jealousy when they go off and start worshiping idols.
Yeah.
I can see that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
After everything I've done for you, this is what you do to me.
Yeah.
So, and that's with Israel, and I understand that relationship. Then there's the rest of us barbarians wandering along, and so I
What do
wonder.
you mean by barbarians? I'm not a barbarian.
I'm waiting for him to finish this.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I mean, to tell you, all right.
By the way,
You went to-
Abraham wasn't an Israelite.
Well, I understand that,
All right, so I just want to make
but a
sure.
relationship developed
I
there.
understand.
It's,
And
it's
the
like,
same relationship can develop. All right, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But a relationship developed there, and it was so that God doesn't work to the same time frame as we do. In other words, time's different for Him. So
we have, yeah.
well, we have a little bit more limited scope than He does. But the thing is, that relationship developed in the seed of Abraham. There was a covenant. There was this like marriage vows, if you will. So, and for people that are not in that relationship, that are other, it's not that it's not, possible or anything, but we're wandering around, and it's kind of like, you've got this relationship going on, and if you want that relationship, I think what has to happen, you have to commit to it. It's not like, I don't know, it's one of those things of, we got a whole billions of people here on this planet, and not all of them are involved in that relationship with the Almighty.
True.
So the jealousy there, the zeal is for those people that make that commitment and have that relationship with God. And once you make that, to me, this is how I view this, and once you establish that, then if you start wandering off course and going and doing things that you shouldn't be doing that are offensive to the Creator, then you can expect to have a little bit of anger involved there.
Yeah. So an example, if Lyndon left you, I'd feel bad for you, but I wouldn't be nearly as passionate about someone else's wife leaving them
As they would.
my own leaving me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get that. Just to clarify, and I know you know this, anyone who grabs hold of the covenant can be part of that. Isaiah 56 is one of the best, it's like anybody. So I know you know that, but once that relationship,
it's grabbing a hold of it. Before you grab hold of it, you're just somebody wandering around.
and just because someone is a descendant of or has the right pedigree doesn't necessarily mean they're in a relationship either.
Well,
we
there
have
was all that
examples.
plaguing thing.
Yeah, we have
You can be in the relationship and then still have to pay a heck of a price.
Yeah, we have
If you-
examples
if
in
you
the
go
Hebrew
wrong.
Bible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm trying to categorize the personal responsibility versus the national responsibility here. And so, and then at the same time, look at a term called generational curses that you might have got into a little bit this morning about the sins of the fathers and so on and so forth. So my mind's kind of, I'm trying to compartmentalize all that.
yeah.
Yeah. So, how do we stand on the sins of the father and correcting that somehow versus we're only responsible for our own actions. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I'm at on this. Maybe you can
Well,
jump in on that a little bit.
I noticed that Patty recommended, she put in there Daniel chapter 9, verse 4.
Okay.
That is a great example. Daniel chapter 9 is a great example of what the whole class was about, including looking at Psalm 106. I'm responsible for Ross. You're responsible for Dave. You're responsible for John. And everyone listening is responsible for themselves. Now, the point is Deuteronomy 24:16 and several places in the prophets, this is my class the last couple of weeks,
Yeah.
says that the sins of the fathers, I'm not punished directly because of them, nor can my father, his sins, in other words, I'm not accountable for his, he's not accountable for mine. The trick is this: the confession of those sins is what's required. So that's the deal. It's like in Daniel chapter 9, Daniel wasn't doing those things, but he put himself in that group. He said, we have done this, we have done this. It's the same thing if you look at Ezekiel, Ezekiel 18, Ezekiel 33, make this really clear. So God is a jealous God, kana. You can say passionate, doesn't have to be jealous, people debate. But there is a difference, though, between, like, people go, oh, my father did some bad things and I'm doomed. No, that is not what the Bible teaches.
Real quick, interject on this jealousy thing. Jealousy is a strong emotion. It really is. It can get way out of hand. People have done some really strange stuff over jealousy. Now, there's a I'm going to throw a word in there, righteous jealousy. There is such a thing as righteousness in the emotion of jealousy. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's good for us to be jealous. You're jealous of your wife and so on and so forth. But
there's a good side of it and a bad
side of it. But there's a very bad, it can be taken out of hand. Now, I don't think God possesses that bad part. I don't think so. I think he's perfect. It has a good part down. So I just want to throw that in there on the jealousy thing.
No, I think whenever you think of this idea of being passionate, we ought to be passionate for the things of God. God is a righteous God. We ought to be passionate about relationships on our plane with human relationships. We ought to be faithful and loyal, and these are things that the Torah advances, and I think a lot of times maybe we're not passionate enough about faith. Maybe some of us could use a little injection of passion in our faith walk. I think that's what's required biblically. I mean, if you think about it, it's pretty clear that this is one thing that God requires is total devotion in our relationship with Him. We shouldn't be worshiping other gods. And that's been the message all along, and I think it's pretty clear. So
that's very true. And I'm a firm believer in we should all be our own person.
Yeah.
So there are different measurements, so to speak. In other words, you have passion, no doubt about it. I have passion.
Yeah.
But if a person knew both of us real good, they would say, "Well, wait, you guys have the opposite."
Where you approach things differently.
We approach things very differently, but it's still the same thing. It's kind of a strange thing. It takes the whole world to do all this. Really,
so Laura says, so my father did some bad things and I asked for mercy for him. I can't really do teshuvah for him, right? That's one of the main points is you're confessing that these things took place and that they did, and you can say, forgive our people, but it takes individuals have to respond. In other words, just because Pinchas had righteous indignation and he had passion and he stepped forward and he stood and prayed and he acted on behalf of the right versus the wrong, it didn't help those 24,000 people that didn't, right? It didn't help them, but it stopped the plague. See, that's the point. So there is this idea that there is a inclusion of the corporate and the individual. Individuals are responsible for their individual actions, but they still have to confess these other crimes that were committed.
Because also, I'd like to add to that, there is a thing called "Am I my brother's keeper?" And so we kind of have to look at it as a community thing. If we don't live on different planets, John. We have, what you do affects the planet I live on. So in other words, in a way, I have to help you if I see something that you need help with. And
Yep.
likewise, you have to help me if you see something that will help me. So in other words, we
Excuse me.
can't just go around ignoring people and saying, well, I'm right.
I'm good. I don't have to worry about it.
Good. So, it's a community thing.
We always use that analogy of we're in the boat together.
Sure.
And if you drill a hole in the boat,
We're on
you
the same
can
planet, yeah.
you can bring bad on others that aren't just you. And that's what happens in the story of Pinchas, is that crime,
Because it goes both ways.
people lead their brothers in the wrong path, and before long there are quite a few that are committing these sins. But there were some who didn't. There were some who didn't participate. So, it's like Noah was righteous in his generation. The charge is to be righteous in our generation. We each have that obligation, and I think we should try very hard to be that person. Mary says, if I confess the sins of my fathers, we are forgiven. Does that mean my ancestors do not inherit the traits of my ancestors?
In other words, can you by praying, can you form forgiveness for your ancestors? And I think
I don't
that's
think
the
so.
bottom
No,
line.
I don't think it's you're asking about these crimes that were committed. You're asking for God to forgive, right? But you can't go back in time, and there are consequences that come regardless. And so the bottom line is that confession is required. Daniel chapter 9 is an important read. I didn't have that in today's class, but it is something, Patty brought it up. It is a very key passage, and it demonstrates this on a real key level. Because if you read that, you'll recognize that Daniel is confessing, look, we've made all these mistakes, and yet you've called us your people. Let's keep that covenant, let's keep that covenant. Now, if you remember, I did read Leviticus 26, verse 38 through 46. And in that, it describes a situation when, as a result of the crimes of previous generations, the tribes are scattered throughout all the nations. From that location, because of the sins, these people have to get a humble heart, their uncircumcised humble heart, and they confess their sins and the sins of the others, and that's what brings about the ultimate redemption. So it's a matter of saying, look, I know why we're here in this place. I know what happened. I can discern from history what took place to put us in a bad position. And now I'm confessing that, and that brings about the restoration. So it could be a fine line. The bottom line is you are responsible for you, but you have inherited in some sense the results, the consequences of crimes that were committed previously.
Right. And in future, because I'm looking at a question now, it's the future tense, the future ancestors, traits of my ancestors.
Yeah, I might be misreading that. But if you look at one thing that I always bring up, fathers shall not be put to death for children, neither children be put to death for fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. So the idea is that in Ezekiel 18 really, really gets into this, and I think that's another key. We went through this in a previous class. It's just like saying it goes through all the examples. If your father was bad and you're good, you're not going to suffer for what your father did. If the father is good and you're bad, the father doesn't suffer because of your bad. And it goes through all these different examples just to make sure. Have I covered them all? I think I have. That's what.
So basically, by doing that prayer request to the Creator, you're saying, recognize that this is where, I came from, and please excuse me, but I'm sorry that happened and they did that. I'm not gonna, and move forward with that. Like you were saying, this is about, let's get back to that relationship between you and me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly right. And
Just so it's a kind of way of saying, look, I know that bad things happen from my family coming down to me. I'm sorry for that. I'm not gonna do that.
We're gonna fix it.
We're gonna fix it.
And
Yeah.
then
The buck stops here.
The buck
We're
stops
saying.
here.
And then future generations will have that to their
Well, that's your
advantage.
intent.
And
but
they'll
you
have an
can't-
example.
You
yeah,
can't control that,
can't
but
control that.
all you can say is it's my intent to fix that going forward.
Golly.
Yeah,
Ultimately, we're responsible for ourselves.
that's
Yeah.
right.
You know, at the same time.
But
the
your kid
idea
shouldn't
that-
have to come back and say, I'm sorry for the old man. I mean, wait a minute.
What's that? What's that saying? Get the plank out of my eyes.
Yeah.
Or get the the beam
So
out
you
of my
can see
eye,
clearly to get the
get
splinter.
So my point is that once we get to an understanding where we think we see right and we can fix things, then we can have an obligation to broaden that out a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. We have to help our brothers, in a
Yeah.
sense. It has to be done in humility. It's not a matter, it's a whole lot easier to see someone else's issues
Sure.
than it is to see our own. The trick is, it is in some ways like a golf game where you're trying to make yourself better, but at the same time,
Long nobody's looking.
yeah, well, you do have others that are watching you. Your kids, your grandkids,
Kick the
those
ball a
around
little
you.
bit, yeah.
In your generation, people are watching you.
That's right.
So I think that's real important.
It is.
Sherry asked, and I think we've covered this time and again. I don't believe that you genetically inherit the sins of your fathers. It's not DNA passed down. You're not born into the sins of your fathers. That's something I don't agree with. We all have free will.
Because if it was genetically passed down, you couldn't do anything about it.
No, I mean if you can't help it, you're just hopeless and lost. That's the whole point of Ezekiel 18 is that you're not. He said, look, where did there's a proverb that the fathers ate sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. This is what I've taught on for a few weeks. That in and of itself, he says that's a proverb. Like, don't blame your present woes and I'm just hopelessly lost and it's because of something, it's because
my parents'
somebody 6,000 or if somebody wants to say 12 billion or whatever years ago ate an apple or a fig.
Right.
That's the reason I'm hoping. No, that's
Just
not
today.
what the Bible teaches.
Or closer
You-
than that, it's all my parents' fault.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to want to look for someone else to blame it on, and I don't think that. But I do think we ought to be humble about our approach to God, but we also ought to be zealous in our application. We ought to do everything in our power to jump in and seek to live our life accordingly. It's just, now you can, if your parents have done something wrong, you may grow up in that environment and you may be exposed to that and you may be more likely to commit those things. There are a lot of people who suggest that. It's the old nature versus nurture argument. But ultimately, we're all responsible for our own actions.
A good example of the children in the wilderness wandering or camping, however you want to look at it. They're children that were raised there, born there, broke that and went into the promised land. They broke that curse pretty much.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just an example of that.
Uh-huh.
Well, our laws
of the
today
generations
are
breaking
established based upon that. In other words, if you have a child that's of legal age, there's no liability held on you if they go out and rob a liquor store or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're, at that point, they're on their own. I mean, they have to make those choices. They have a choice either to commit a crime or not commit a crime. It's the same thing with the Creator. You have a choice of,
Well,
offend or not
I raised
offend.
him right. I raised him right.
And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that's true. We tend to raise, and that's why we have this strong doctrine in the Bible that says, you are accountable as a parent to raise your children in the right way.
Yeah.
But not everybody does that. And unfortunately, so many people have been the victim of poor parenting, and they've, in a way, watched bad examples, and I feel for those people. But in our society, I think one of the big problems in our society is that a lot of people want to blame everybody except themselves. They want others to be accountable for what they do and what they've done.
That's what they do.
And you know, I mean, there are plenty of examples of that.
Sure.
So what we have to do, though, is maintain this idea that individual accountability is a big point of the biblical text, and in that responsibility, that onus is on us to live according to God's ways. Look, in all throughout the Torah and the prophets and the writings, we have examples of people who were born into the chosen people, but they didn't act in accordance with what God required. Look at the first high priest. Look at Aaron. He did some bad things, so bad that God wanted to kill him. He didn't get to go into the promised land. You look at his first two sons. People, in other words, people might say, I am of the priestly line of Levi. I am a Levite. I am, I'm holy. I'm therefore this, I'm that, and they can draw certain conclusions. But if you look at Aaron's sons, Nadav and Abihu, that's first generation. What happens to them? They're burned up because they violate the way that they are supposed to walk. Aaron's not punished for their crimes. They are. And throughout the biblical text, we have examples of that. But over time, people tend to shirk personal accountability, and what they want to do is, it's part of the doctrines and teachings to say that you're helpless, you can do nothing, someone else has to assume the responsibility for your sins. But that's not what the biblical text teaches. I mean, it's just not.
It's a tough one. There's a couple comments, Wade on YouTube, and I'm not quite sure I follow this, and that he's trying to relate to the father that raised us.
Yeah.
And it says, it seems to where men would be asked their name and they would give their father's name to give their own, as their own, to show who they are and where they came from. In other words, my dad was this, and he was this. And so we have a tendency to do that. So your fathers make up who you are, even though you may not be judged for their sins. In other words, you were raised, so you have an inheritance. Growing up, I wanted to be I was a rebel with my dad, 100%. I mean, I just didn't want to be anything like him or anything.
Yeah.
But as I've gotten older, I've had other relatives that were older say, "Man, you're just like your dad. You're just like your dad." I'm like, "Oh my God!" So that's we can't get away from that, nor should we have to, unless there's a bad.
We just have to
thing.
correct bad behavior.
So you can't just say, "My father was bad. I'm going to rebel." All that. That's kind of my point.
Yeah.
We have to figure out what is bad and good and go with that. And I think
Torah puts it this way: choose good and live.
Choose it. Choose the
Choose
good.
bad brings bad, good brings good.
If every generation would do that,
That's right.
good grief, it wouldn't take. How long would it take for us to be perfect and everything to happen?
Seems like it'd go pretty well for
Seems
us.
like it'd go pretty quick.
Might go
As
well,
we all
but I
know,
don't
that
know,
doesn't
it's never
happen.
going to get to that point.
That's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. It's going on for a while. If it's just a little bit here and there, and I think we're trying to do what we can to alleviate this issue. And I think we're seeing some results. I really do.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people are turning to Torah in our day more and more and more. And, people can debate. Some would say, well, I believe that I'm from the lost tribes. Others would say, well, you don't have any proof.
Right.
But whether a person is or isn't, back to kind of the way we started with John's comment, Isaiah 56 is pretty clear. Anyone, don't let this non-Jew say, I'm totally cut off. No, anyone who grabs hold of the covenant and seeks to live their life accordingly, that puts them in that relationship. And I think that sometimes people, because of the way we do things in modern religion, we say, well, you have to convert, or you have to be saved, or you have to do whatever and ever. They give this list of things that you have to do to be part of a group But all God requires is someone to say from their place, I want to live according to God's ways. And they attach themselves to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and to his ways.
They
And that's pretty
circumcise their
much
own
it.
heart, basically, I guess.
Yeah,
Say that?
there's one text that says circumcise your heart. There's another that says that God will do it. Leviticus 26 that we read today says basically, wherever you're at with your uncircumcised heart, humble yourself, confess your sins, confess the sins of the fathers, and that's when the thing starts turning in the right direction. So if we read texts like Daniel chapter 9, if we read things like Psalm 106, and you work your way through, you're going to see, oh man, anyone who reads the Torah comes away with, wow, man, they messed up a lot. Well, yeah, they did. And those are the things that are listed as the sins of the fathers, if you will. So it's important, I think. It's important for us to recognize those. You can't go back and fix your grandpappy's crimes against God. What you can do, I think one of y'all brought this up, is you can say, I'm not going to do that in my house. You know?
In a funny kind of way, that does kind of fix what he did. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it don't literally do it.
Yeah.
But it fixes
Well, I'm
it.
sorry that he did that. We
Yeah.
won't do that again.
Yeah. And it doesn't, by the way, Leviticus 26 doesn't say that you're praying for the forgiveness of your parents' sins. It says you're confessing those. In other words, I think you called it admitting. You're basically suggesting and stating, I know these things happen. But like Joshua says, as for me and my house, I mean, he even overstates it some. How do you know? I mean, can you speak on behalf of your whole house? I mean, now he's saying, by golly, we're going to do it this way. There can be that, but even in that, a person has to choose individually. And so I think it's important that we at least make that declaration. Look, in all my power, I'm going to raise my children and my grandchildren to fear God and to serve Him and to live a righteous and upright life. But again, you know, my mom did the same for me. It didn't mean that her prayers didn't ultimately bring me around, because I think they had a big effect on that.
All children, and I applaud the fact that some people can say, as for me and my house, and by golly, this is the way it's going to work.
Yeah.
They had a little bit more control back then. They didn't have television and cell phones and
Yeah.
10-ton, and they were right there at the house until they got married, generally.
Yeah.
And were working in the fields with
They
Dad.
married him off young, too.
Yeah, well, they were working in the fields with Dad, and one day it says, okay, you got that section over there. So, but, you know, just like you said, rebelling against your father.
Right.
I think to some extent, it's a natural evolution and a reaction that every kid goes through.
Yeah.
Because-
That's what gets you out of the house.
Well,
Facilitates that departure.
I
tried
think
to,
it's part of the plan.
you know, my wife and I tried to embed all the right things in the kids, and of course, the first thing is there's a rebel. I'm doing it my way, and blah blah blah. But to Ross's point,
There's healthy and there's unhealthy.
well, to Ross's point, if you made the effort, then you set an example and a pattern, and they're going to try and get back around to that. And as they get older and start realizing and calling on their resources of things that they've heard and know, you know, it's at that point that you hope and pray they make all the right decisions.
Yeah.
And that's part of your job. You can't, the thing about the free will
Right.
is you can't bottle them up and control them and saying, this is you and this is the way you're going to be. Forget anything else, it ain't gonna work.
No.
Yeah.
It's just
And
not gonna
if you
work.
could force somebody to do it, it wouldn't be the same.
That's right.
It has to be free will. Look, there are a lot of religious zealots. This is one of my points about zeal isn't all that's required. No one can say that people like ISIS and so forth aren't zealous for their religious teaching. But zeal is not the only thing required. I mean, it has to be coupled with other God-fearing parts. And I think if you belong to an organization which forces adherence to certain things, that's not going to work. It's not going to work, and it shouldn't work, and thankfully it doesn't work in many of these cases. You know, I've talked about the Torah Taliban before, you know, where you have some people who are so hyper-religious in their particular view of things that they're very critical of everyone else. Mm-hmm. But, you know, think about the examples I gave. When Elijah, he says, look, I'm the only one. They've torn down your altars. They've done this. They've done that. And I'm the only one. And God said, you're not the only one, Elijah. And by the way, when you leave from here, I want you to appoint your predecessor, your follower. I want you to appoint the next guy to take over your office. You know, people look at that different ways, but it is interesting.
It's like you're fired.
You know, think about Moses. When Moses, it says, he acted in haste. I mean, he is so upset with the children of Israel, he spoke harshly about the children of Israel. How many times do we speak harshly about others who are on the path? And ultimately, that brings about punishment. You know, I think it needs, we ought to be very generous and open and welcoming and focus on us, try to be a good example. We want to live our life in such a way that people around us say, I want to do that too.
I think what you just said there is very, very true. I'd like to add that the way we, and the phrase you use is what I'm referring to, the way we live versus what we say out of our mouth.
Yep.
Sometimes that's a big issue there.
It is.
You can actually drive wedges with your mouth.
Yep.
But your actions speak louder than words.
They do.
I didn't come up with that saying, did I?
No, I don't think
No,
so,
I
but
don't
it's
think
good.
so.
If you did, I like it. You
Have
know,
to
you
write
think
that down
about it,
somewhere.
again, the whole thing about Bilam, if you just read his words, you come away with, wow, this guy's really, but ultimately, behind the scenes, we know that he is plotting and devising a scheme against the children of Israel, which ultimately takes 24,000 lives. I mean, that's what Numbers 31:16 says. Because of what he did, he caused them to be pulled into this trap. But again, individually, they're held accountable for their actions. Those who rebelled, they're taken out. So again, they had choices to make. They chose to follow the bad. It's why Moses over and over says, look, hey, choose you this day. Choose the good, receive the blessing. Choose the bad, receive the curse.
Is this person was supposed to ban showing up here? Stuart Lamb, did I get it right? Is that
Is somebody doing something?
Yeah, look at this.
On Facebook?
I don't know. Yeah, on Facebook.
Oh.
Did you get it?
Yeah, there are sometimes people who log in and they're bored. They don't know. I mean, they don't know that they should be being nice. So you just let that go. But I do think it's important that that as we work towards living our life in a way that's pleasing to God, there are those who I think that as we try to live our life accordingly, there are those who are watching, and I think that they ought to be, at least the door is open for them. If they choose not to live, they're held accountable for that, not us.
Exactly right.
I had a interesting, I wanted to share with you, because you had mentioned several times from the scripture, Israel is supposed to be the people of God, the chosen people of God, are supposed to be the light of the world, the blessing. Mm-hmm. And so it was after, I went to a special service after Shabbat, because I try to be here for Shabbat, if I can. It was the day after Shabbat, and they were having a special service with a reading of the commandments, the 10 words. And so after that, I was talking to one of the Orthodox Jewish people. And so we were just talking about this and that and Israel and things that we both knew. And I said, well, and he asked a question that led to, and I said, well, neither my wife nor myself have any Jewish blood in us whatsoever. Matter of fact, we got our DNA checked and can verify that we have no Jewish ancestry whatsoever. However, we have chosen to follow the Torah.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's our mission, is to try and bring people to the Torah.
Yeah.
So that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, Pirkei Avot is one
So I
of the
thought that
greatest
was
quotes
pretty-
on that. You know, it's be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace, pursuing peace, and drawing all people to the Torah. So it is a mission. Chabad is real big on this. The Rebbe was very big on trying to lead people to this particular walk. And ultimately, you know, if you look at it, plenty of text, Isaiah chapter 2, Micah chapter 4, talk about how ultimately all people will be drawn towards the light of Torah, as Anita points out, and drawn towards Torah faith. Now, there are always going to be those who oppose up until a final point, and then ultimately they won't be there. So, you know, I mean, for now, you're going to have people with different views, and they're worshiping other gods or no gods. Remember, quite a few times in the Bible it says, there are two Psalms in particular that talk about the fool says in his heart that there is no God. So, you know, there are fools. There are people who don't believe, and I think that's obvious. You know, sometimes it becomes more obvious. Richard asked, what is the smaller Bible that you have below your Tanakh? I have the book. I have a lot of Bibles, but the one that I had up there today with me was an English Bible that contains the. I had it today because I was reading from the Apocrypha, from the book of Maccabees. So that's the deal there. That's the Bible that I have. It's a RSV with the Apocrypha. Richard also asked, how do I contact John for info on the hotels? What's that? They don't need to, do they?
Look at the news, the bulletin.
Okay.
It's
in the bulletin.
You put
Okay.
it. You put it. Re-put it in the news bulletin again. So if you're not on the list for the bulletin, get your email address to Ross,
Yep.
and he'll make sure that you get the bulletin.
Or
And-
you can sign up on our website,
Yeah.
unitedisrael.org, and
Yeah.
sign up for the website. I mean,
And
sign
it's
up
got,
for the
it
weekly
has all the
bulletin.
information there. There's the two hotels in town. One is the Best Western, and the other is the Francis.
Mm-hmm.
And the reservations have to be made before, I believe it's September 27th for that weekend in October, or they release the reservation, and then it's good luck. And I say good luck because that particular weekend, there won't be a hotel room available in town.
Why isn't there a rodeo?
There's a rodeo.
Okay.
Every weekend of October.
Yeah, every weekend in October there's the big rodeo, and it draws people from all over the area,
yeah.
and some people from other states. So it's a big deal. So anyway, get your reservations if you're coming, and it also helps us, like Russ was saying, to plan various things around the number of people that are going to be here.
That's right.
So.
That's right. And we'll be putting that up. I also intend to put a registration page on the website. I'll need some help with that, so I'll get with Anna. But I just haven't yet finalized the details on that. She's perfectly able and willing and pretty quick about doing that when I get information to her. So, again, October 18 through 20, and I think it's going to be a great time. We have plenty of seating in here. We held a recent UI conference here in St. Francisville. We'll be doing live streaming of those events so people who aren't able to make it can make it. And but I hope that many of you can make it. We talked about it in Charlotte in the spring. We're going to probably continue to have most of our annual meetings in Charlotte at the headquarters. But we talked about what can we do, maybe a fall meeting, or we can draw in some of the crowd that's closer to the south, and I mean, anybody in the world can come. We've had people fly in from Canada for our meetings. But just to let you know, we kind of
Several
move it
times,
around
yeah,
a little bit,
yeah.
huh?
Several times. It's
Yeah, that's
different
right.
People.
That's right.
And I think I know everybody, every time we've had a get together here or in Charlotte, there's a lot of people that do a lot of research and a lot of effort with Torah and Torah offshoot type learnings. One of the things that Ross discussed here at the UI Center is that we're going to try and have it set up to where it's not all just teachings, to where there is time for fellowship among the UIW people. One of the things that does is that instead of just coming in, sitting down, and having class all day, which is kind of tough to do that, didn't enjoy that when I was in college if I had classes all day.
Yeah.
It gives us an opportunity to talk with each other and to do a little bit more development as United Israel as a group of people. In other
Yeah.
words, to help develop and maintain a self-identity.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. We've even talked about showing a couple of movies and, having some fun. And we'll have this is a large area, not just in the building, but outside the building, in terms of people can congregate in different areas, and we might have several things going on. So hopefully all of you will be able to make it, or many of you will be able to make it. And those that can't, like I said, we'll have as much as we can. We'll have it live streamed so people can participate. I have this weekend quite a few members of my family coming in. I think I have a small window, a couple of days, where all my kids will be together. So I'm looking forward to that. And they are coming at some point today and into this evening. So I'm looking forward to spending time with my family, and then early next week get right back into it. So,
Well, Russ, you have enough kids and grandkids where you could set up and have a couple of football teams.
yeah, just about. Just about. That's right. We're growing. We have 7 grandkids and 1 on the way, 6 kids. So it's getting to be quite a show when everybody shows up.
At least a good
so
basketball game.
we're all short though. Not many of us are tall.
Well,
basketball
you
players.
can lower those baskets down a little.
That's what we might have
Everybody
to
sure
do.
doesn't make
That's right. That's a good point.
that one tall guy
That
shows
one
up.
tall
That's
guy
right.
shows up.
Yeah, some of the boys are getting kind of tall, I guess, but.
Yeah.
Well, look, it is. It's always fun to get together. We're going to be back here. If not before, we'll be back here. We intend to be here on Shabbat, 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Monday is generally the day that I try to put out the bulletin. So, I know a couple of people have talked about, and several have kind of initiated this idea of units. It's one of the things that our original bylaws and Constitution call for. And what does that come down to? It's pretty straightforward. Anyone who believes in the one God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and seeks to live according to his ways, further acknowledging the laws of Sinai as a basis for the foundation of their faith, is a welcome member. And although we've not really had any formal membership drives, people are generally, a lot of people don't like joining anything. But we've sort of begun to kick this off again. Some are talking with their group about being a unit, and some are down to the place where they're just picking their name. What are they going to call their unit? People understand this is not hierarchical. We don't tell you what you have to teach. Again, outside of those basic fundamental points, it's pretty straightforward. And I think a lot of us are in different places. We don't want to be too dogmatic. But at the same time, we want to give autonomy to these groups. We don't have anybody, no one has to pay anything to join. There's not membership dues. We just don't do that,
What, no Pope?
No Pope. That's right.
Pope.
So,
Having said all that, why don't we have thousands doing this?
we ought
Just
to.
thousands
We
doing
ought to. I think we probably will one day. I think people are
That's not a
starting
real
to.
question. There.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It ought to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, share the video, the class video, and hopefully more and more people will find it beneficial to them. might help them answer some questions. I generally try to respond when I get emails. Sometimes the correspondence is a little bit more than I can handle in a quick way, but nonetheless, I do try to keep up with that. So if you have questions, email me or message me on Facebook. Richard Burton says, what is John's last name so I can message him about the hotels? It's Langberg.
Yeah. He wants to get a hold
John
of
Langberg. You can find him on Facebook. So,
him. They want to know how to get in touch with us. He's sitting right here.
yeah. There you
At
go.
mail, all lowercase, at mail.com.
John Langberg at mail.com.
Not
Not Gmail, just mail.
What's your
All
telephone
right.
number?
John,
What do you think
let me
of
type
that?
it.
Birth, date of birth?
If they email me, I'll give them
Langberg.
a telephone number if they need.
At mail.com. All right, I just put it in there. And John has stepped in to help me on this, so you'll
Yep.
see his email right there.
Might be a little slow, but I check it. I try
Good.
to check it every day,
Very good.
Steady.
at least once.
You're steady.
At least once a day.
All right. Well, have a beautiful week, and we look forward to seeing you here with us next week. Same time, same channel, 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube.
Set your watch.
Set your watch. Take it easy. Have a beautiful week. Shabbat Shalom. Shavua Tov.
Good talk.